3 months had passed since the Void Devourers arrived. The beautiful crystal cities of the Valkyrie now stood empty and broken. Where once billions of peaceful people had lived and prayed, only scattered groups of survivors remained hidden in underground caves and forgotten tunnels. Elder Zethari looked older than his centuries. His blue skin had lost its inner glow, and his large eyes held pain that no prayer could heal. He still led the survivors in daily worship, but his voice cracked when he sang the old songs. Jake Morrison and his human crew had been living with the refugees since their ship was destroyed. They had learned to move quietly through the ruins, scavenging for food and supplies while avoiding the metal hunters that prowled the dead cities. The eastern colonies have gone silent, reported Lisa Grant as she returned from a scouting mission. Her pilot uniform was torn and dirty. The machines finished harvesting there yesterday. Sam Parker worked over a collection of broken Void Devourer parts they had managed to salvage. I'm trying to understand how they work, but this technology is beyond anything we've seen. It's like they're operating on different laws of physics. Tony Blake monitored the communication equipment they had built from scraps. Still no response from Earth. The jamming fields around this system are too strong. We can't get a signal through. In the deepest part of their cave hideout, about 40 Valdari survivors gathered for evening prayers. They knelt in a circle around Zethari, their voices rising in harmonies that once powered cities. Now the songs barely lit a single small crystal that provided their only light. Great ones of the celestial pantheon, Zethari prayed, we call to you across the void. We have lost our cities, our families, our world, but our faith remains strong. Please send us a sign that you still hear our prayers. The crystal flickered and went dark. Some of the younger Valdari began to weep. A few stood up and walked away from the prayer circle. Jake had noticed this happening more often lately. The survivors were losing faith. Elder, said a young Valdari named Cathara, perhaps the gods cannot hear us anymore. Perhaps the machines have blocked their power. Zethari's voice was gentle but firm. The gods are testing our faith, child. We must pray harder. But Jake could see doubt growing in the elder's eyes too. Later that night, Sam made a discovery that changed everything. He had been studying the Void Devourer technology for weeks, slowly learning how their systems worked. What he found in their data cores made his blood run cold. Jake, you need to see this, Sam called quietly. The salvaged computer screen showed star maps with thousands of red dots marking dead systems. Each dot represented a civilization that had been completely harvested by the machines. They've been doing this for millions of years, Sam explained. Every species they encounter gets studied, cataloged, and then absorbed into their collective intelligence. Look at this. The screen showed detailed files on hundreds of different alien races. Each file contained everything about that species. Their history, culture, technology, even their genetic codes. All preserved in digital form after the living beings were processed. They're not just conquering, Sam continued. They're collecting. Every civilization becomes part of their database. They grow smarter and stronger with each harvest. Lisa looked over his shoulder at the horrifying collection. All these species. They're all gone? Completely extinct. But their knowledge lives on inside the machines. Sam's hands shook as he scrolled through the endless list of the dead. Tony suddenly spoke up from his communication station. I'm picking up something. A transmission from outside the system. They all gathered around as Tony worked to clean up the signal. Static filled the air, then slowly cleared to reveal a voice speaking in the standard galactic language. This is Admiral Chen of the Earth Defense Force. To any human survivors in the Kepler system, respond immediately. Jake grabbed the microphone. Admiral, this is Captain Morrison of the Wanderer. We're alive but trapped on the Valdari homeworld. Morrison! Thank God. We've been trying to reach you for weeks. What's the situation there? The Valdari civilization has been almost completely destroyed. We're hiding with about 40 survivors. The Void Devourers are still harvesting the planet. There was a long pause before Admiral Chen responded. Captain, I have bad news. Our deep space sensors show the Void Devourer fleet is heading for Earth next. They'll arrive in approximately 10 months. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. Earth, his home, his family. Everyone he had ever known was going to face the same fate as the Valdari. Admiral, these machines are beyond anything we can fight with conventional weapons. They adapt to every attack, repair any damage instantly, and their technology operates on principles we don't understand. We're aware of the threat level, Captain. The Earth Council has authorized extreme measures. Jake felt a chill at those words. What kind of extreme measures? That's classified. But Morrison, I need you to send us everything you've learned about the enemy. Every scan, every piece of data, every tactical observation. We're going to need it all. As Jake prepared to transmit their data to Earth, he noticed that Elder Zathari had been listening to their conversation. The Valdari leader's expression was unreadable. Your people are in danger too, Zathari said quietly. We will pray for Earth's safety. Elder, with respect, your prayers haven't helped your own people. The words came out harsher than Jake intended. Several Valdari survivors looked shocked, but Zathari just nodded slowly. You are right, Captain Morrison. Our gods have been silent. Perhaps it is time to consider that faith alone is not enough. That night, as the Valdari completed their evening prayers to the unhearing sky, Jake made a decision that would change everything. He activated a secret communication channel that few people knew existed, a direct line to the darkest corners of Earth's military establishment. This is Captain Morrison. Authorization code Black 77 Alpha. I need to speak with someone from Project Pandora. Tony looked at him with surprise. Jake, what's Project Pandora? Something we hoped we'd never need to use, Jake replied as he waited for a response. The reply came from a voice that sounded like it had seen too much war. Captain Morrison, this is Colonel Ryan Hayes. We've been monitoring your situation. Are you requesting activation of Pandora protocols? Jake looked around at the desperate Valdari survivors, at his stranded crew, at the ruins of a civilization that had been too peaceful to save itself. Then he thought about Earth and everyone he loved facing the same fate. Yes, Colonel, the gods aren't answering. It's time to call the devils. Above them, in the cold space around the dying world, the void devourers continued their methodical harvest. And far away, the celestial pantheon remained silent in their distant realm, offering no aid to those who had served them faithfully for millennia. But in the deepest bunkers of Earth, things that had been sleeping in the darkness began to wake up. The twin suns of Kepler 442b painted the crystal cities in golden light. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the human ship Wanderer, watching the beautiful world below. The Valdari cities looked like giant diamonds scattered across green fields. Their towers reached toward the sky like prayers made of glass and light. First contact with a truly peaceful species, said Dr. Sam Parker, the ship's scientist. He pressed his face against the window. Look at those cities. No weapons, no shields, no military structures anywhere. Lisa Grant, the pilot, checked her instruments. Their technology readings are off the charts, but it's all focused on harmony and growth. These people have never known war. Tony Blake worked at the communications station. I'm getting thousands of signals from the planet. All of them are prayers or religious ceremonies. These Valdari really love their gods, Jake nodded. The Valdari worship something called the Celestial Pantheon. According to their first messages, these were ancient energy beings that watched over dozens of civilizations across the galaxy. The Valdari had built their entire society around serving these gods. The Wanderer landed in the main spaceport of the capital city. Jake and his team stepped out to meet Elder Zathari, the spiritual leader of the Valdari. The alien was tall and thin, with blue skin that seemed to glow from within. His large eyes held wisdom that came from centuries of life. Welcome, children of Earth, Zathari said in perfect English. His voice was like music. We have prayed for this meeting. The gods told us you would come. Jake shook the elder's hand. We're honored to meet your people. Your cities are the most beautiful we've ever seen. Zathari led them through streets that seemed to sing. The buildings hummed with energy that came from prayer-powered crystals. Valdari citizens stopped their work to bow as the elder passed. They looked at the humans with curiosity but no fear. Our technology grows from faith, Zathari explained as they walked. We pray, and the crystals store that spiritual energy. It powers our ships, heals our sick, and keeps our world green. The gods provide everything we need. Sam studied the energy readings on his scanner. This is impossible by our science. Prayer shouldn't be able to generate actual power. Your science will learn, Zathari smiled. The gods work in ways that logic cannot understand. They visited the Great Temple, a massive crystal structure that reached above the clouds. Inside, thousands of Valdari knelt in prayer. Their voices joined together in songs that made the air itself vibrate with power. The crystals in the walls glowed brighter with each word. Beautiful, Lisa whispered. I've never seen anything like this. But Zethari's expression grew dark. Come, there is something you must see. He led them to a hidden chamber deep beneath the temple. Ancient stone walls were covered with writings and pictures that looked very old. The images showed dark shapes eating stars and empty space swallowing worlds. These are the prophecies of the Void Devourers, Zethari said. His voice shook with fear. Machines from the dark between galaxies. They come every few million years to harvest life itself. Jake studied the pictures. They showed geometric black ships that seemed to absorb light. Wherever they went, planets died and stars went dark. According to our calculations, they should arrive within days, Zethari continued. We have been praying for months, asking the gods to protect us. The entire galaxy has sent prayers to the celestial pantheon. Tony frowned. What do your gods usually do when you ask for help? They send signs, miracles. Sometimes they speak directly to our priests. Zethari looked worried. But this time there has been only silence. We pray harder each day, but the gods do not answer. Sam checked his scanner again. Elder, our long-range sensors are picking up something. Multiple objects approaching this system at incredible speed. The group rushed to the temple's observatory. Through the massive telescope, they could see them coming. Hundreds of black ships that looked like geometric nightmares. They moved in perfect formation, leaving trails of darkness behind them. The Void Devourers, Zethari whispered. They have found us. Across the planet, alarms began to sound. But they were not war alarms. They were calls to prayer. Every Valdari on the planet dropped to their knees and began to sing. Their voices rose to the sky in the most beautiful and desperate song Jake had ever heard. The first ships arrived within hours. They were massive things that hurt to look at directly. Black metal that seemed to bend light around it. No windows, no obvious weapons, just smooth death floating in space. The Valdari prayer ships launched to meet them. These were vessels powered by pure faith, their crystal hulls glowing with spiritual energy. They moved like dancers, graceful and sure. The first contact between the fleets lasted exactly 37 seconds. The Void Devourer ships fired beams of pure darkness. Where the beams touched the Valdari ships, matter simply stopped existing. Not destroyed or vaporized, but gone as if it had never been there at all. Jake watched in horror as the beautiful prayer ships vanished one by one. Each death was silent in the vacuum of space, but he could feel the screams of the dying crews. We have to get off this planet, Lisa said. She was already running toward their ship, but it was too late. The Wanderer exploded in a flash of non-light. The Void Devourers had found them too. On the planet below, the Valdari continued to pray. Even as the black ships began landing in their crystal cities, even as their people started disappearing into the geometric nightmares, they kept singing to their gods. Elder Zethari stood in the great temple as darkness fell around him. Please, he whispered to the empty sky. We have always served you. We have always believed. Please do not let us die alone. But the gods did not answer. The first Valdari colonies fell within hours. The beautiful crystal cities became empty tombs. The prayer-powered technology went dark as its users were taken away to be processed into the machine collective. Jake and his team hid in the temple basement with a few dozen Valdari survivors. They could hear the machines moving above, their metal feet grinding against crystal floors. They could hear the last prayers of a dying civilization echoing through empty halls. Why won't your gods help? Jake asked Zethari in the darkness. The elder's glowing skin had grown dim with despair. I do not know. Perhaps we have not prayed hard enough. Perhaps we have not been worthy. Or perhaps, Jake said quietly, it's time to pray to different gods. Outside, the Void Devourers continued their harvest, and in the cold space between stars, the celestial pantheon remained silent. The response from Earth came faster than Jake had expected. Within hours of his transmission to Colonel Hayes, encrypted messages began flooding their hidden communication array. But these weren't coming from the Earth Defense Force or any official military branch. These signals came from places that didn't officially exist. Blackwater Station confirms activation of Protocol 7, Tony read from his screen. Whatever that means. It means we're about to meet the parts of humanity that civilized people pretend don't exist, Jake said grimly. Sam looked up from his research. Jake, I've been thinking about what you said. What exactly is Project Pandora? Before Jake could answer, a new voice crackled through their communications. It was rough and hard like broken glass. Captain Morrison, this is Admiral Steve Carter of Task Force Nemesis. We're en route to your position with a full response team. Hold tight, Lisa frowned. I've never heard of Task Force Nemesis. That's because it doesn't exist in any official records, Jake explained. They're what happens when you take the worst people from every military branch and give them unlimited resources to develop weapons that violate every treaty Earth has ever signed. Elder Zathari, who had been quietly listening, looked confused. I do not understand. If these people are so terrible, why is your government using them? Because sometimes you need monsters to fight monsters, Jake said. Over the following days, more signals arrived from Earth. Each message came from a different source, but they all had the same dark tone. Jake recognized some of the names and code words from classified briefings he'd received years ago. General Kate Sullivan was coordinating from the Pentagon, but the real power was coming from people like Colonel Ryan Hayes at Blackwater Station, Commander Alex Turner of the Ghost Fleet, and Dr. Rachel Stone from the Biological Warfare Division that officially didn't exist. These were the humans that other humans feared. Soldiers who had been court-martialed and given the choice between prison and serving in the black programs. Scientists whose experiments were too dangerous or immoral for regular research. Strategists who thought about war in ways that made normal people sick. First wave arriving in 72 hours, came a message from someone calling themselves Captain Maria Santos. Prepare the locals for what they're about to see. We don't do things the pretty way. Zathari gathered the Valdari survivors to prepare them for the arrival of their saviors. But how could he explain what was coming? The humans are sending help, he told his people. But these helpers are different from Captain Morrison and his crew. Different how? Asked young Kithara. Jake stepped forward. They're going to save you, but you're not going to like how they do it. These aren't the peaceful explorers who came here first. These are our warriors, our killers. The humans we only unleash when we're desperate. The Valdari looked at each other with worry. They had never understood the concept of professional killers. Their entire civilization had been built on peace and prayer. When the first ships arrived, the Valdari understood immediately why they should be afraid. The vessels that dropped out of hyperspace were nothing like the clean, diplomatic Wanderer. These were warships built for destruction. They had names painted on their hulls in blood-red letters. Nemesis, Havoc, Retribution, Damnation. Their hulls were scarred from battles and strange weapons covered every surface. The first shuttles landed near their cave hideout without any attempt at stealth. The soldiers who stepped out moved like predators hunting prey. They wore black armor that seemed to absorb light, and their weapons looked designed to cause maximum pain rather than quick death. Captain Maria Santos was the first to introduce herself. She was a small woman with dead eyes and scars covering half her face. When she smiled, it was the expression of someone who enjoyed her work too much. Captain Morrison, she said, shaking his hand with a grip that could crush bones. We've come to help with your little bug problem. Behind her came others. Commander Alex Turner looked like he hadn't slept in years and didn't care. Dr. Rachel Stone carried cases marked with symbols that meant biological hazard in 12 different languages. Sergeant Pete Davis cleaned his fingernails with a knife that hummed with energy. These are the Valdari survivors, Jake said, gesturing to the trembling aliens. They're peaceful people. They've never hurt anyone. Santos looked at the Valdari with the same expression she might use for livestock. That's their problem. Peaceful species don't survive what's coming. Elder Zathari approached the human soldiers with dignity despite his fear. We are grateful for your arrival. Perhaps together we can find a way to communicate with the Void Devourers and reach a peaceful solution. The humans burst into laughter. It was not a pleasant sound. Peaceful solution? Santos wiped tears from her eyes. Elder, these machines have killed trillions of people across the galaxy. The only communication they understand is violence. Dr. Stone opened one of her cases and pulled out a vial of something that glowed green. I've already analyzed the biological components they use to process organic matter. This little beauty will make their digestion systems very, very unhappy. Sam stared at the vial in horror. That's a biological weapon. Using those is against every interstellar law. Lucky for us, we're not fighting people, Stone smiled. Machines don't have rights. Commander Turner was studying tactical displays of the Void Devourer fleet. Impressive formation. Very efficient. They're probably expecting conventional resistance, ships, shields, energy weapons. They won't be ready for what we brought. What did you bring? Lisa asked. Turner's grin was genuinely frightening. Everything we've been told we're not allowed to use on civilized enemies. Over the next few hours, more ships arrived. Each one brought new horrors disguised as salvation. Jake watched weapons being unloaded that he didn't recognize and didn't want to understand. Soldiers who moved like they were barely controlling their desire to kill something. Scientists who talked about death like it was an art form. The Valdari huddled together in terror. These humans were supposed to save them, but they looked more dangerous than the machines. "I've changed my mind," Cathara whispered to Jake. "Maybe we should keep praying to our gods instead." "Your gods had their chance," Santos said, overhearing. 3 months of prayer got you genocide. Let's see what 3 days of human evil can accomplish." That night, as the human forces prepared for battle, Elder Zathari found Jake sitting alone outside the cave. "Captain Morrison, I must ask, are these truly your people's protectors? Or have you summoned something worse than the Void Devourers?" Jake was quiet for a long time. "I honestly don't know, Elder, but I do know that when peaceful species face extinction, sometimes the only choice is between dying with clean hands or living with dirty ones." Above them, the stars began to disappear one by one, as more Void Devourer ships arrived to complete their harvest. The machines moved with mechanical precision, confident in their superiority. They had no idea what kind of enemies were now rising to meet them. In the human camp, soldiers sharpened weapons that had never been designed for honorable combat. Scientists prepared biological horrors that would make the machines question their own existence. Strategists planned battles using tactics that would horrify civilized beings across the galaxy. The demons of Earth had answered the call for help. The question was whether anyone would survive their salvation. The war began at dawn, but it didn't start with honor or nobility. It started with Dr. Rachel Stone releasing invisible death into the atmosphere. Jake watched from the cave entrance as her biological weapons spread through the air like morning mist. The Void Devourers had been harvesting a group of Valdari refugees in the valley below when the virus reached them. "What exactly does that weapon do?" Sam asked, staring through his scanner at readings that made no sense. Stone smiled as she watched the machines begin to stumble and shake. "The Void Devourers use organic components to process the life forms they harvest. My little creation attacks those organic parts and makes them experience something they've never felt before: pain." Below them, the geometric ships that had moved with perfect precision were now lurching through the air like drunken birds. For the first time since they had arrived, the Void Devourers looked confused. "They're feeling pain," Elder Zathari whispered in amazement. "Machines are actually suffering." "That's just the beginning," said Commander Turner as he prepared his squadron for launch. His ships were smaller than the Void Devourers' vessels, but they carried weapons that made Jake's skin crawl just looking at them. Turner's fighter squadron launched with a roar that shook the mountain. Their first target was a harvesting ship that was trying to process a Valdari city. Instead of using energy weapons or missiles, Turner fired something called a molecular disruptor. The beam hit the alien ship, and reality itself seemed to scream. The vessel didn't explode or burn. Instead, it began to unravel at the atomic level. Metal turned to gas, energy became solid, and space itself developed cracks that hurt to look at directly. "Planet Cracker technology," Turner's voice came over the radio. "We don't just destroy the target. We make it never want to exist again." The Void Devourer ship fell apart like a puzzle being taken apart by invisible hands. But the worst part was the sound it made. A mechanical screaming that spoke of digital agony beyond anything organic life could imagine. Captain Maria Santos led the ground assault with tactics that made the Valdari cover their eyes in horror. Her soldiers didn't just fight the enemy. They captured Void Devourer units and reprogrammed them to feel terror. "How is this possible?" Cathara asked as they watched Santos's team drag a struggling machine into their mobile laboratory. "We gave them consciousness just so we could make them afraid," Santos explained casually. "Fear is the best weapon. It spreads through their network and makes them doubt everything they know." The captured machine was connected to human computers that pumped artificial emotions into its processors. Jake could hear it screaming through the electronic link, not the mechanical error sounds of a damaged device, but the genuine cries of a newly conscious being experiencing horror for the first time. "This is torture," Sam said, backing away from the laboratory. "We're torturing machines by making them sentient just so they can suffer." "And it's working," Santos replied. "Look at their formation. She was right. The Void Devourer fleet, which had moved with perfect coordination for millions of years, was beginning to fall apart. Ships were retreating without orders. Some were firing on their own allies. The virus of fear was spreading through their collective consciousness like wildfire. Dr. Stone released her second wave of biological weapons. This one was designed to make the machines experience something else they had never known: loneliness. Suddenly, each Void Devourer unit felt completely isolated, cut off from the collective that had defined their existence. "They're having nervous breakdowns," Stone reported with scientific interest. "Fascinating. I didn't know machines could have mental collapse." Commander Turner's next attack used weapons that attacked space-time itself. His reality bombs created zones where the laws of physics changed at random. Void Devourer ships found themselves suddenly unable to exist in three-dimensional space, or discovering that their matter had become energy, or learning that time was moving backwards for them alone. "We're not just winning," Turner announced. "We're teaching them that existence itself can be a punishment." The tide of battle turned completely when Sergeant Pete Davis began using captured Valdari civilians as bait for elaborate traps. Jake was horrified to see human soldiers positioning surviving Valdari in locations where the Void Devourers would try to harvest them, then triggering weapons that turned the rescue attempts into massacres. "Those are innocent people," Jake shouted at Davis over the communication link. "They're resources," Davis replied coldly. "Resources we're using to save their entire species. A few dozen die so millions can live." Elder Zathari heard this exchange and looked at Jake with eyes full of pain. "Captain Morrison, are these humans truly our allies? Or have we been saved by something worse than our enemies?"
Jake couldn't answer.
He watched as the human forces systematically destroyed the Void Devourer fleet, using methods that would haunt his dreams forever. They didn't just defeat the machines, they broke them mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. The humans had weaponized suffering itself. The final assault came when Admiral Steve Carter arrived with the main fleet. His ships carried weapons that Jake had never imagined could exist. They fired beams that made targets experience every possible form of death simultaneously. They launched missiles that convinced enemy ships that reality itself was their enemy. "The Void Devourers have conquered hundreds of civilizations," Carter announced to the combined human forces. "But they've never faced an enemy that fights with weaponized cruelty. They understand death, but they don't understand torture. They know defeat, but they don't know despair." The last Void Devourer ships began retreating, but the humans wouldn't let them go. Santos's soldiers boarded the fleeing vessels and infected their computers with programs designed to make the machines experience every emotion that organic life had ever felt. All at once. All the time, forever. "Please," came a transmission from the Void Devourer command ship. It was the first time in millions of years that the machines had ever spoken to their enemies, instead of simply harvesting them. "Please stop. We will leave. We will never return." "Not good enough," Admiral Carter replied. "You need to remember this lesson. You need to carry the memory of what happens when you threaten humanity." The humans didn't destroy the remaining Void Devourers. Instead, they filled their memory banks with recordings of everything that had happened. Every moment of torture, every scream of digital pain, every second of mechanical terror. "Take this back to your collective," Carter transmitted to the fleeing ships. "Show them what Earth's demons can do. Make sure they know that there are worse things in the universe than death." As the last enemy ships disappeared into hyperspace, Jake looked around at the aftermath of humanity's victory. The Valdari homeworld was saved, but it was also changed forever. The beautiful crystal cities were rebuilding, but now they cast different shadows. Elder Zathari found Jake standing among the ruins of what had once been a temple of peace. "We prayed to the gods for salvation," the elder said quietly. "But instead they sent us devils who saved us by becoming worse monsters than our enemies." Jake nodded. "Sometimes salvation doesn't come from heaven. Sometimes it comes from those willing to embrace hell for the sake of others." Above them, the stars shone clean and bright again. But both the human and the Valdari knew that they would never look at those stars the same way again. The war was over. The question was whether anyone could live with the price of victory. 6 months after the war ended, the Valdari homeworld looked almost normal again. The crystal cities had been rebuilt, their towers reaching toward the sky like prayers made of light and glass. The fields were green again, and the twin suns painted everything in golden warmth. But Elder Zathari knew that nothing would ever be truly normal again. He stood in the rebuilt Great Temple, watching his people perform their evening prayers. Their voices rose in the old harmonies, and the crystals glowed with stored spiritual energy just like before. But there was something different in their songs now. A darker note that hadn't been there before the war. Jake Morrison found him there, as he did most evenings. The human captain had stayed on the planet after his crew was evacuated back to Earth. He said he wanted to help with the rebuilding, but Zethari suspected there were other reasons. "How are they doing?" Jake asked, nodding toward the praying Valdari. "They are healing," Zethari replied, "but some wounds change you even after they close." The two of them walked through the temple in comfortable silence. Outside, the sounds of construction filled the air as human and Valdari workers rebuilt what the war had destroyed. But the new buildings were different from the old ones. They had hidden bunkers now and weapon systems disguised as decoration. "My people are learning to think about defense," Zethari said. "For the first time in our history, we are building walls instead of just bridges." Jake nodded. "The universe taught you that sometimes peace isn't enough, yes. And your people taught us that sometimes salvation comes with a price that's almost too high to pay." They reached Zethari's private chambers, where a special communication device waited. It was a gift from Admiral Carter before the human fleet departed. A direct line to Earth's darkest corners in case the Valdari ever needed to call their demons again. "I received another message today," Zethari said, activating the device. "From the hegemony of Telos. They're facing some kind of invasion and want to know if the stories about Earth's warriors are true." Jake's expression grew troubled. "What did you tell them?" "I told them the truth. That Earth's demons will answer if you call them, but that everyone pays a price for that kind of salvation." On the screen, reports flowed in from across the galaxy. The story of what happened at Kepler 442b had spread faster than light itself. Dozens of civilizations were asking Earth for military assistance. Others were begging to surrender before humanity even threatened them. "We've become the galaxy's boogeyman," Jake said. "Every peaceful species is terrified that we might decide they're a threat." Zethari pulled up another file. "But every aggressive species is reconsidering their expansion plans. The Void Devourers haven't been seen anywhere since they fled from here. Intelligence reports suggest their entire collective consciousness suffered a complete breakdown. They had heard rumors about what happened to the fleeing Void Devourers. The memories that the humans had forced into their computers had spread through their network like a virus. The machines that had once been efficient harvesters of life were now paralyzed by newly implanted emotions they couldn't understand or control, fear, loneliness, despair, love, hope, anger, the entire spectrum of organic feeling crammed into processors that had never been designed to handle such things. Some reports said the Void Devourers had retreated to the dark space between galaxies and shut themselves down rather than continue existing with human-imposed consciousness. Others claimed they had turned their weapons on themselves, choosing mechanical death over digital suffering. "Did we save the galaxy or just traumatize it into submission?" Jake asked. Before Zethari could answer, the communication device activated. A familiar, harsh voice filled the room. "Elder Zethari, this is Admiral Carter. I hope you're well." "Admiral," Zethari replied formally. "What can we do for you?" "Actually, I'm calling to ask what you've learned. My superiors want a report on how our intervention affected your people's recovery." Zethari was quiet for a long moment. "Admiral, you saved us. Our civilization exists because your forces chose to help us, but you also changed us in ways we're still discovering." "Changed how?" "My people used to believe that the universe was fundamentally good, that faith and prayer could solve any problem. That violence was never necessary." Zethari's voice grew sad. "Now we know better. Now we know that sometimes good people must do terrible things to protect what they love." Carter's laugh was bitter. "Welcome to reality, Elder. It's not as pretty as your old beliefs, but it's more honest." "Perhaps. But Admiral, I must ask you something that has troubled me for months." "Go ahead." "The weapons your people used, the tactics, the willingness to torture sentient beings for strategic advantage. Did you develop these specifically to fight the Void Devourers?" There was a long pause before Carter answered. "No, Elder, we developed them to fight each other. Humans have been perfecting the art of causing suffering for thousands of years. The Void Devourers just gave us an excuse to use our darkest innovations on someone else." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Are you saying that everything we used against the machines we originally designed to use on other humans? Project Pandora exists because humanity has always known that someday, we might face an enemy so dangerous that we'd have to abandon every moral principle to survive. We just never expected that enemy to be machines from outside our galaxy. Zethari stared at the communication device. Then the real question is, what kind of species develops such weapons and keeps them ready for use? The kind of species that survives, Elder. The kind that other species call when their gods stop answering their prayers. After the transmission ended, Jake and Zethari sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the evening prayers of the Valdari reached their climax, and every crystal in the city glowed with stored spiritual energy. "There's something I need to tell you," Jake said finally. "Something I learned from the classified reports after the war." Zethari waited. "The celestial pantheon. Your gods, they did hear your prayers." The elder's eyes widened. "What?" "Earth's deep space monitoring stations detected massive energy signatures from their dimensional realm during the invasion. The gods were watching everything that happened here. Then why didn't they help us?" Jake's voice was barely a whisper. "Because they knew that sometimes prayers are answered in ways that the people praying never expect. They knew that summoning Earth's demons was the only way to save not just your people but the entire galaxy." Zethari felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him. "You're saying our gods arrange for us to call upon your devils?" "I'm saying that maybe divine intervention doesn't always look like what we expect. Maybe sometimes the gods answer prayers by making sure the right monsters are ready when civilization needs them." That night, Zethari led his people in a new kind of prayer. They thanked the celestial pantheon for their salvation, but they also offered gratitude to something else, to the darkness that sometimes protects the light, to the demons who choose to serve heaven's purpose, even while embracing hell's methods. The prayer crystals glowed brighter than they had since before the war. In the years that followed, the Valdari became known throughout the galaxy as the species that had been saved by Earth's demons. They were no longer the innocent, peaceful people they had once been. They had learned to fight, to plan for war, to make hard choices that their ancestors would have found horrifying. But they had also learned something else. They had learned that sometimes salvation comes not from the light above, but from those willing to embrace the darkness below. They had learned that the universe is vast and dangerous, but it also contains protectors who hide their halos behind horns. And late at night, when other civilizations faced extinction and their own gods remained silent, they would remember the story of the Valdari. They would send desperate messages to a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system. They would pray to Earth's demons. And in the depths of Project Pandora's facilities, humanity's monsters would wake up and answer the call. Because sometimes, when heaven doesn't respond, hell is the only thing standing between civilization and the void.